Well, there are concerns about the rising prices of crucial medical equipment India needs to fight COVID-19. Much of it's made in China. Beijing says there is no ill will. It's just basic business. So what more can be done to promote cooperation? Also, the Tokyo Olympics are just months away, but pressure to cancel the big event is growing as concerns over COVID persist. What's at stake for public health, the organizers, and the athletes themselves? Welcome to The Point. Coming to you from Beijing, I'm Jonathan Betts, sitting in for Liu Xin. India is facing a deadly second wave of infections with an average of 300,000 new cases every day. Attention now is turning, though, to medical supplies from China, with reports that companies are selling substandard oxygen concentrators and charging more. China's foreign ministry says the prices are based on supply and demand. So what can be done on both sides, and what political factors might be at play? I'm now joined in Beijing by Liu Yunyun, chief commentator of Beijing Review. It's a weekly magazine. And from Kerala by Professor Madhav Nalapat from the Department of Geopolitics and International Relations at Manipal University. It's good to have you both on the show with us today. So let's talk about these oxygen concentrators first off. It's a crucial piece of medical equipment. People need to stay alive. Families are desperate for these machines. It can mean life or death for so many people in India. China is the world's largest manufacturer of these concentrators. So, Professor, first off, just help us understand how badly needed are these machines and how hard are they to get right now?
Well, they are definitely badly needed for the simple reason that the strategy in India has changed. Instead of oxygen being supplied by a few large companies and then distributed through trucks and railway, the effort is now to decentralize the production of oxygen. And in that, oxygen concentrators are extremely helpful. And as you correctly said, China is among the leading suppliers of these concentrators. So now we have this push to decentralize the production of oxygen and make us less reliant on logistical problems in supply chains.
And why are Professor, why are we seeing this push right now?
Well, we are seeing this push because there's frankly, I think the second wave was not expected, was not really anticipated, and government for some time scrambled to catch up. And about 2 months ago, the Prime Minister gave very clear instructions that there needed to be a change of policy. And among those changes in policy was a decentralization of production of oxygen.
But help us. But when it comes to the Chinese angle of this, the fact that these concentrators are made in China, what precisely are the concerns that we're hearing from the Indian side?
Well, I'd like to say that China is the leading supplier of these concentrators in India, and they are being bought in large numbers from China. So clearly, it would be helpful if the prices were lower, for the simple reason that this is a major problem. And after all, the budget is limited. So from that point of view, if we get the concentrators at a lower cost, and we are also assured of supplies, then I think that would be extremely helpful.
So the General Counsel for India in Hong Kong raised concerns about this specifically, these concentrator issues. She's concerned about the prices of them, saying that they have risen an incredible amount, more than they would expect because of the pandemic. Yun, let me bring you into this conversation. How valid are these concerns about quality and price when it comes to medical equipment coming from China?
First of all, and we have to admit that there are price hikes in India, and I think largely it is not because of the Chinese companies who is hiking the prices, because India is a free market economy, and there are a lot of middlemen and a lot of intermediaries who is, trying to seek a profit through making these business deals. So I think during a pandemic like this, if there is no government regulation, if there is no government intervention, and if the companies are going to profiteering from the pandemic, and then there would be a disastrous effect for its citizens. And I think the Indian government should step in and take actions and not to blame China. And as you mentioned that the South China Morning Post story, and I actually went to the comment section of that story, of that report that you mentioned, and I see a lot of, and to my great surprise, and even though the article was written in favor of the Indian government and repeatedly, quoted the Indian envoy, but actually the people are blaming the intermediaries in India who is profiteering from selling the PPEs imported from China.
So I want to play a soundbite for us real quickly because China's foreign ministry weighed in on this, on this issue here about these concentrators, this medical equipment coming from China, the prices going up. I want to play for you what she said. So listen to this.
根据我们向有关企业的了解，因为比如说以
Taking oxygen concentrators as an example, one reason is that the increase in demand affected global supply chains. Besides, due to shortage of raw materials which need to be imported from Europe, production capacity is affected. What's more, Indian buyers usually make the same demand through various channels and sometimes buy products through different channels. This has overly inflated demand, which has to some extent affected market order and pushed up prices.
影响到市场的秩序，推高价格。
So Professor Nalapad, I want to get your reaction to that. Is that a fair response?
Well, I'd like to say that if the Chinese side gives clearly the prices at which these concentrators are being sold to the Indian buyers, then definitely this kind of profiteering will I'm sure be stopped. But there is no doubt that there has been profiteering by hospitals sometimes, in the form of medical supplies, and including in these concentrators. But the point is the difference between the price that are being paid by the importers and the price at which finally it is going to the ultimate consumer, who is essentially a patient. So I think the spread of that price is something, and it will help if the Chinese side basically shows the prices at which they are being supplied. And as I repeat, if the Chinese side ensures, and China has got a very effective governmental system, that these prices are kept steady.
So Yun, let me get your response to that. Do you think the Chinese side could do more to keep these prices steady?
Well, China has always pursued a community of shared future for all mankind, and the Chinese government has shown us sympathy and empathy towards Indian people and, the people of the world who is suffering from pandemic. And the government will do everything. The Chinese government, of course, will do everything it can to stabilize the price at the gate of China, but it cannot do much to help. When the PPEs were shipped to India, and there's not much the Chinese government can do. But let me remind you.
But let me jump in there real quickly, because when early in the pandemic, when we saw medical supplies, personal protective gear, masks, we saw major shortages of this equipment. We saw price hikes from different vendors. The Chinese government did step in and address that. So can they not do the same now?
Well, let me give you an example on how China cracked down on price hikes and hoarding during pandemic period. And in Fengtai district in Beijing, and there is a drugstore who sold 10 face masks for 850 yuan, which means $15 for one face mask. And do you know how much fine that drugstore has to pay when the Chinese government found it guilty of hoarding and price hikes? 3 million kuai, which means $500,000, and that is crippling and that is devastating for a small drugstore. So that is a clear signal and strict signal Chinese government is sending to anyone who is profiteering or taking advantage of during pandemic times. And I hope the Indian government, maybe they can do the same thing.
So, Professor, hanging over this, one thing that has to be mentioned is the fact that tensions between China and India have been rising. We saw the border skirmish last year that turned deadly. So, do you think that this is a factor here in this controversy over the prices of oxygen concentrators? Professor, let me get the professor to answer that.
That people in India would welcome, people who are suffering from this terrible disease would certainly welcome any reduction in price, and I quite agree that there needs to be a very severe crackdown on this kind of black marketing. Basically, you're black marketing in death, you're black marketing in disease, and that's absolutely criminal. And there should be a crackdown. I presume there is some kind of a crackdown, and I think the good news is that China seems to be getting almost into normal. It's the most populous country in the world. United States, which is the third most populous country in the world, is getting into normal. And hopefully India will have the right mix of policies and implementation to ensure the next 2 or so months we also get back to normal so that the world can function as it was before this horrible pandemic hit all of us.
You know, Professor, part of this is also the fact that when it comes to aid coming from China to India, India tends to kind of skirt this issue, skirt direct answers about whether it'd be willing to accept aid from China. Do you think that India should be accepting more help from China?
Look, I'd like to say very clearly that, of course, commercial purchases are not aid. I mean, India, for example, is having a lot of imports from China. It's about $60 billion surplus which China has got. And that's not, charity by India. That's basically because we got Chinese items that we are paid for it. So here also, items are coming and we are paying for it. But I don't see any problem, frankly, if a gesture is made regarding, for example, supply of such equipment at lower prices than now. I mean, it will be very difficult to find someone who can oppose that kind of thing. Because now take, for example, COVAX. India supplied so many tens of millions of vaccines free of cost. And hopefully will do so again in the next 4 or 5 months when the reforms that have been introduced 2 months ago, which I agree should have been introduced 1 year ago, but were at least introduced 2 months ago. Hopefully that will happen again. So I would like to say that I don't take this kind of social media ranting in either China or India seriously. Serious people don't take them seriously. And if a gesture is made, well, human beings are human beings. And if the gesture is negative, it will be seen in that light. If it's positive, it will definitely be seen in that light.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Professor Madhav Nalapat from Manipal University, along with Chief Commentator of the Beijing Review, Liu Yunyun. Thank you both for your time.